What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down how quarterbacks can increase their throw velocity and throw a football harder. So I hope this video helps you guys out. But also, fellas, if you're a QB and you would like to get some off-season training with us this year, we are going to be traveling out to 15 states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up, we're going to be traveling out to San Francisco, then Orlando, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles. If you guys are local to one of those cities, would like to work with myself, my staff of coaches for 2 whole days, 8 hours of training total, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you. Let's get started with this video. So now, first thing we're going to be talking about here is we're breaking down Aaron Rodgers' motion and how he's able to create a ton of throw velocity. Then we're going to actually break down a baseball swing and a golf swing and talk about the similarities to the quarterback throwing motion. And then we'll be breaking down some of the common mistakes that QBs make, which decrease arm strength. So let's watch this first clip. So Aaron Rodgers, the biggest thing I want you to understand is that he has great hip and shoulder dissociation. So what is hip and shoulder dissociation? What does that even mean? Simply, that means that your shoulders go back as your hips are driving through. That's the key to being able to throw with any kind of velocity, any kind of power on the ball. It's being able to generate torque. So it starts out with your throwing sequence. So the first part of the throwing sequence is your front stride. Your front stride has to get down into the grass. You look at a lot of NFL quarterbacks. Tom Brady's a great example. Josh Allen. You know, they take these just like almost like strides in place is a phrase that I've been saying to my quarterbacks. It seems to help them. But really, honestly, it's probably a 6-inch stride. That stride needs to get down because that is what allows your hips to rotate through. And that's the second part of the throwing sequence. So the throwing sequence should be front stride, then the hips start to rotate through, then the shoulders start to go through, then the ball trails behind. You do not want to have your shoulders lead your hips in the throwing motion because that is what can decrease velocity. So starting out, before we even worry about the foot strike, we have to get into a good pre-throw position to be able to generate velocity. So what that means is you need to have your back foot underneath your back shoulder. That is the key position that we want to try to get to. I call that keeping your weight back, because when you have your weight back, what allows your hips to rotate through, which gets you power from your legs, your hips, and your core, which is where most of the power comes from in the throwing motion, you have to be about 60 to 75% loaded on that back leg. Because when you have that weight back there, that is how we transfer the weight to coil the hips and to get my legs involved with the throw. If I don't transfer my weight through, I'm going to be throwing off my back foot, number one, but also I'm not getting any throw power. That shift of weight from your back leg to your front leg is what allows those hips to rotate through and is what also gets that front stride to strike the grass. So we have to make sure stride's happening first and those hips are starting to go through because of the weight transfer. But before all that happens, I need to be in a good pre-throw position. That is number one. So now, as you're transferring your weight, I mentioned that phrase in the very beginning, hip and shoulder dissociation. What does that exactly mean? So as you're transferring your weight, as the front foot is getting down, as the hips are going through, we want to load with my front shoulder. You want to keep your front side closed because that's how you generate that position of, torque, pop, velocity on the ball. Just like how a baseball player, which we're going to look at in a second, keeps his shoulders back as he takes a step with his front foot. As a quarterback, a golfer, a baseball hitter, you guys are all rotational athletes. Even a baseball pitcher, even when you're throwing a baseball, everybody's a rotational athlete. So to be able to generate power, it all comes down to pretty much the same things. Just instead of holding a baseball bat or a golf club, you keep your shoulders back and you're separating your hands with the football. So when you can get to this position, hips are driving through, shoulders stay loaded back, that whip right there, that opening of your front hip, because of the weight transfer, is what gets you more velocity on the ball. That's what creates that whipping effect with your arm. Now, when we do this, the reason why I said that you want to have your back foot underneath your frame is because a lot of quarterbacks, what they've been taught in the past is to have a super wide base. So you want your feet to be outside of your shoulders and you're going to push off of your back foot. But when your front foot strikes the ground, and let's say Aaron Rodgers' back foot, instead of being underneath his shoulder, is maybe a half a yard back, the issue with that is that your leg will extend, your hips will not be able to rotate. You see how Rodgers' front hip is able to clear? That will not happen if your base is too wide. So when your base is too wide, hips can't clear, guess what will happen? The shoulders will go through before the hips do, and that's what decreases power, decreases velocity on that throw. So we have to make sure, fellas, foot strike happens first. Hips are starting to go through as my shoulders are back, and those hips are going to bring the upper body through. That is the key to being able to throw with velocity and having plenty of arm strength. So let's play this full speed. We're going to look at a clip here from Tom Brady just to further emphasize these things, because one thing I like to make clear in these videos is that every quarterback's different. You don't have to throw the ball like Aaron Rodgers. You don't have to throw the ball like Tom Brady. We want to look for key mechanical aspects of both of their motions that you can add to yourself. What are the best guys in the world doing, and how can I apply that to my actual game? So we're not going to spend too much time on this Brady throw, but I just want to point out a couple of things. So this is an absolute rope that he throws over the middle, right? This shows that he could still do it. For all the people who are saying Tom Brady sucks, he's washed, this shows that he could still do it. He could still make these types of throws. So let's look at his mechanics. Weight is back. Where's his back foot? Underneath the back shoulder, so he's in a good pre-throw position, right? What happens? Foot strike gets down, as you can see. Where are his shoulders? His shoulders are loaded back. Hips are rotating through. Hips are going through before the football does. He's not taking a big stride. His back leg isn't extending way behind him, and he's able to throw this thing with a ton of velocity. Fellas, we want to look for the key mechanical aspects that the best guys in the world do, and how can you actually apply that to your game. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at Bryson DeChambeau swinging a golf club, and then Bryce Harper swinging a baseball bat. Now, again, I'm not a golfer. I'm not a baseball guy. I'm sure there's a lot more mechanical nuances that go into it, just like there's a lot more mechanical nuances that go into throwing a football than there is than just separating your shoulders and hips. But Bryson DeChambeau's probably got the longest drive out of all the professional golfers that can hit the ball a mile, and you're going to see with the swing that he takes. But how's he able to generate that power? It's not because he's just a big guy. When you look at him, yeah, he's probably on the bigger side of things, but it's not like he's jacked. He doesn't have a huge upper body. It's about being able to rotate and being able to generate torque. So let's play this full speed. So when he takes the ball back, you see how much power and how much rotational force he has on this swing. I'm going to play this again. So when his shoulder closes, watch what brings the shoulders through. So essentially, the only thing that's different about a golf swing and a football throw is that there's no front stride. Your front stride is essentially already grounded into a golf swing. But in a baseball swing, it's not, and that's what we're going to break down in a second. But when DeChambeau goes back with the club, watch what happens. His shoulder rotates, right? So his shoulder is closed. That is very similar to the position that you want to get to on foot strike with a football swing. Now watch what brings the club through. The club is here. Watch what his hips start to do. His hips fire through. He's essentially taking that weight that he has on his back leg, and look where his back leg is, underneath his back shoulder in his stance. And he is taking that weight and transferring it to the front foot to get his hips to fire through. And you see how the club trails behind. Hips going through, front stride already down, shoulders are back, club is trailing behind. Very, very similar, in a very, very similar way to generate power, just like how we throw a football. Like I said, I'm not a golf guy. I couldn't tell you a thing about the grip. Like I could play decent, but like I couldn't tell you a single thing other than separating your hips and your shoulders. But it is extremely similar. And it's easy for you. The reason why I bring this up is because it's easy for guys to understand that. Guys who maybe grew up playing golf. A lot of you guys, I'm sure, grew up playing baseball. It's easier to think about quarterback mechanics when you understand, oh, that's like, because hitting a baseball, like getting the mechanics down of swinging a baseball bat is probably a little bit easier. But if you can almost flip that switch in your mind, like, okay, that makes sense to me. That's why I show this. So let's play this again full speed, and then we're going to show Bryce Harper swinging a baseball bat. So he's got a great swing. Obviously, it's poetry in motion watching this guy swing. But let's talk about the mechanics. So this is probably more so similar to throwing a football because there's a front stride involved. But watch how he takes a step with the front foot. He takes a step. Where are his shoulders? Shoulders are loaded. It's not like he's stepping with the front foot and the bat is already coming through. So many old quarterback coaches, like I'm going to go back to this example of Aaron Rodgers here for a second. So many old quarterback coaches used to teach, when you take a step with your front foot, you want to get to opposite 90. You want to spread open your chest. But when you spread open your chest, there's no torque there. There's no hip rotation involved. You're just rotating with your entire body. And that's not how you generate consistent power. Maybe you're able to generate power, but the ball's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be consistent velocity. It's not going to be accurate. We have to be consistent with what I am trying to do. So let's go back. Let's go back to the Bryce Harper example. So you see, foot strike happens. His shoulder is closed. Now watch what he's doing. He's taking that weight, back shoulder, back foot underneath the back shoulder. He is taking that weight from his back leg, transferring it through, and what brings the bat through. See how his hips are going through, bat trails behind. That is the name of the game, fellas. Hitting a baseball, hitting a golf club, and throwing a football. They're all connected because all three athletes are rotational athletes. And rotational athletes need to generate torque, and torque is how you get more velocity, throw the football harder, and you take pressure off of your arm. So I'm going to play this full speed one more time. So now, we've looked at that. We know how we generate power. So what are some of the mistakes that guys will make when they're trying to throw hard? So the first one I want to discuss is an overstride. So this is something that so many young quarterbacks struggle with because, they try to work on the stuff that we talk about. They try to have their back foot underneath their frame. They try to have that base where they're loaded on their back leg, but sometimes they will have an overstride. So Josh Allen, probably the strongest arm in the NFL, if not the strongest, one of the strongest next to Patrick Mahomes. But I want you to watch this throw. You see how this throw kind of dies at the end? Not his most rip of a throw, I guess you could say. And he's probably trying to place this thing in there a little bit, but mechanically, he doesn't really set himself up to throw with a whole lot of velocity, right? So a lot of quarterbacks, they have naturally a strong arm. Maybe you're a taller guy, you have a strong arm, and you're thinking, man, well, I could throw darts and I don't even need to worry about my mechanics. Fine, good for you. But there's a point where you're going to get to a level where you're going to be throwing a ton. Think about a college football player. How many throws does a college quarterback have a week, right? You got bad mechanics, your arm is going to start bothering you. I'm going to tell you that right now. And you know what? And you might get away with it in high school because you may practice once a week, like in the off season. That's what I'm trying to say. In the off season, you might throw once a week. It's got natural God-given ability. You have a strong arm. So what? But you will eventually start to feel it in that elbow, in that shoulder, if you're not using your legs and your hips properly. So we watch Josh Allen throw here. So he's got a good base, back foot under his frame, but I want you to watch his front foot. You see how it takes a long strike. So he goes back, he separates his hands, but that front foot isn't in the ground yet. So when you close that front shoulder, but your front foot doesn't get down and your front foot strikes the ground, naturally, because your upper body isn't going to change, you'll have open shoulders instead of a closed shoulder. So you see how all of his upper body is going this way? It's going forward, right? That's because of the long stride. That doesn't allow him to get to that hip and shoulder dissociation, that position to generate torque, because he has that long stride. Because when you guys are in this base, you got to be very careful of what you do with this back foot. So many times quarterbacks, they'll have that back foot under their frame, under their shoulder, but they push off of their foot. They push towards the target. But when you push towards the target, because your base is on the more narrow side of things, that's going to create a long stride. And that long stride throws off your sequence. Remember, we talked about that. Stride, hips, then shoulders, then ball. But when you have long stride and at the same time you're trying to go back with the ball, because that's just how you throw, you're going to go stride, and then shoulders will beat your hips. You see how his shoulders are ahead of his back leg and his back leg extends back. Now, again, Josh Allen's got a cannon. He probably could have thrown this ball harder if he wanted to, but that would have been with his arm. And I'm just trying to get younger quarterbacks to understand that that's not going to be long term. You might be able to rip it right now. Fine. You know what? Cool. If you don't want to listen to this, fine. But trust me when I say this, if there's going to be a certain amount of throws that you're going to hit and your arm's going to start bothering you because you're not using your legs and you're not using your hips. And usually it has to do with quarterbacks who have a big overstride. Your shoulders cannot lead your back hip. Your back foot cannot trail behind. The whole way he can correct this is by just getting his front foot down now. Now, this is one example, and everybody has a bad mechanical throw every now and then. We're going to show actually a good example of Josh Allen here right now. So which football had a little bit more velocity, first one or second one? You can tell by the way it hits the wide receiver's hands. Like you look at this last one, you see how the ball just kind of dies, finishes down by his waist. Now look at this one. This ball finishes with some energy right at Diggs' head. So why is that? And I want you to pay attention to the foot strike. So he's here. Look at when his foot strike gets down. His foot strike is down, and where are his shoulders? Loaded. So now what's going to bring the ball through? Hips. And when the hips bring the ball through, you could go stride, hips, shoulders, and the ball trails behind. That's how we generate power. That's how we could finish on the ball and get a lot more velocity on my throws. So fellas, make sure we are thinking about my throwing sequence, timing up the foot strike, getting the hips through, being in a good pre-throw position, and being a great rotational athlete to generate that power and velocity on your throws. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. If we really appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys as usual. And again, if you'd like to train with us in 15 states this offseason, check out that very first link in the description below. I'll see you guys next time.